single room space on the top floor of a 3-story building. I chose it because rent was cheap and it was close to work. And as a 23-year-old with student loans and no savings, I didn't have the luxury of being picky. The apartment was clean, functional, and most importantly, mine. The only window in the place looked out over a narrow alley. Across the way was another apartment building, nearly identical to mine. The alley was tight, barely wide enough for a single car to squeeze through, and during the day it barely got any sunlight. At night, it was pitch black. That never really bothered me much. I was working late nights at the time, bartending at a lounge on the north side. I usually got home around 2:30 or 3 in the morning. Then I'd make a quick meal and zone out on my phone until I passed out. One night, about a month into living there, I noticed something odd. I had just walked in, kicked off my shoes, and turned on the overhead light when I thought I saw something move in the window across the alley. Just a flicker. A curtain twitching, maybe. I froze for a second. But when I looked again, there was nothing. The window was dark and still. I shrugged it off. Maybe I startled someone, or maybe it was just a draft. The next night, it happened again. As soon as I turned on the lights, I saw the curtain shift in that same window. This time I was sure I saw it. A hand pulling the curtain back just slightly before letting it fall. I couldn't see the person behind it. The lights in the other apartment were off. It was just a sliver of movement in an otherwise black void. But the reason this really caught my attention was because I had never seen the lights on in that apartment. I always assumed that nobody had lived there. That night, I didn't sleep well. I kept thinking about that attic and the hand. Over the next week, I started paying closer attention. Every night without fail, the curtain would move within seconds of me turning on my lights. It was subtle but unmistakable. It was the same thing every time. There was a slow parting in the curtain. I had a glimpse of the dark space beyond it, and then the curtain would close again. I began testing it. Some nights I would leave my lights off and sit silently by the window. When I did, nothing happened. But the moment I turned them on, even just the dim light by my couch, the curtain across the alley would shift. Someone was watching me. It was obvious. I tried to rationalize it, like maybe someone just liked looking out their window at night. But that didn't explain the timing. It didn't explain the way it always coincided with my arrival. That was too big of a coincidence. I asked my landlord about the unit across the alley, and he told me it was vacant and had been for months. I pressed him, asked if maybe someone had moved in recently, but he shook his head. He even joked that I was being paranoid. I considered calling the police, but ultimately didn't because I felt like reporting someone possibly looking at me through a window in an empty apartment sounded ridiculous. There was no crime or proof, just a feeling that grew worse every night. Then one night, everything escalated when I came home later than usual, around 4 a.m. The bar had hosted a private event and cleanup ran long, so I was exhausted and not thinking clearly. When I reached my door, I noticed something stuck in the frame. At first, I thought it was junk mail or a flyer, but when I pulled it free, I realized it was a crumpled note. It simply said, "Hey," written in pen. My legs went weak because the first thought I had was the apartment across the alley, so I ran to the window and looked across. The curtain was drawn and there was no movement. I called my friend Jamie, panicking. She lived across town but told me to come over right away. I grabbed a backpack, stuffed some essentials into it, and got out. The next day, I confronted the landlord again. This time, I demanded to see the apartment across the alley. He hesitated, but eventually agreed to meet there with the key. The place was dusty and completely empty, with not a single piece of furniture. The walls were bare, and the floor creaked with every step as if the place were 100 years old. But there, in the back room facing my window, was a single metal folding chair. It was positioned directly in front of the window, and they had access to an apartment that was
Do y'all believe this?
supposed to be locked and empty. The police were called, and they searched the place. I'm pretty sure they took fingerprints, but nothing came of it. The fact that my paranoia was correct the entire time, and that I was in fact being watched, it made me sick, wondering how long the stretches of time that sicko would watch me would be. I moved out that week. To this day, I have no idea who was watching me, how they got in, or how long it would have gone on if I hadn't found that note saying, "Hey." I I've considered the possibility of it being the landlord, but ultimately I had to drop that theory because there's no way in hell he wouldn't have went over there to remove that chair before.
He said,
bringing
"Why
me
you
over
buffing
there.
the prices for
I
blinks?"
still dream about that window, and sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night certain that someone somewhere is still watching me.